Hi guys, it's Dan, and in this next vlog we're going to be talking about core function, okay, or core stability. Okay, so when we're talking about core stability, what I'm referring to is the deep core muscles, okay, and neural. So that's going to be muscles like our transverse abdominis. So that's our deepest core muscle. It sits underneath the six-pack abs, or rectus abdominis, and the obliques. It sits underneath all that, and also muscles like our pelvic floor, diaphragm, and another set of muscles which are attached along our lumbar vertebrae, being our multifidi. They're all going to help to stabilize that lumbar spine and keep it where it should be, stop any shearing forces, stop any perturbations going on. So that's really, really important. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about core stability, because that's what your core really does. It kind of helps to stabilize that lumbar spine. The lumbar spine isn't as stable as the thoracic spine, so that's that kind of mid-spine portion, because that has the rib cage. So the rib cage come out of those thoracic vertebrae, they wrap around and they attach here onto the sternum. So this is like a nice solid unit. That whole rib cage is a nice solid unit, but the lumbar spine doesn't have that bony support, so it really relies on that muscular that kind of muscular stabilization of those deep core muscles. So that's really what we want to work on when we're targeting our core. When we're doing like our core work, we should be doing more of this transverse abdominis, this deep core strengthening. That's really what we want to be going after. Now, those other muscles like the rectus abdominis, so again, those six-pack abs, those obliques that you kind of see coming in from the side, they're not great at stabilizing the spine. They only kick in once if needed, if we're doing like very heavy lifting and we do that bracing. Okay, so with that bracing effect, we kind of just pull everything in together in order to lift something. So if we were doing like a heavy deadlift or a squat, they will kick in to help out the TVA and those other deep core muscles. But that shouldn't be our go-to. Those guys aren't great at stabilizing. They're more involved in movement, so things like flexing this spine and rotating the trunk. So they're great at that stuff, but that actual core stability, they're not actually that great at. Okay, so they're part of what we call the global muscles. The deeper core muscles, what we call the local group. So that's really what we want to be going after. That's what we want to be working more on. So I'm going to show you some exercise in this video of some on how to do that, on how to get that transverse abdominis and that deep core group fired up. So again, we've got things like quadrupeds, we've got the bridges, we've got the chops. So I'm going to show you a few exercises with various progressions and regressions on how you can start getting those deep core muscles firing. And these muscles are really important, especially again, like I said, for preventing things like low back pain. So there is research out there to show that those with chronic low back pain had an inefficient activation of the transverse abdominis. It also didn't fire very well. It kind of fired late, so it didn't switch on very quickly. It kind of was a bit late to the party. So the transverse abdominis has this almost like a feed forward mechanism. So before we do any kind of limb motion, like we move the legs, move the arms, we kind of initiate motion, that transverse abdominis should switch on first to stabilize the trunk and also stabilize our sacroiliac joint, because it kind of closes that sacroiliac joint up together. So that's where our sacrum meets our pelvis. So it kind of keeps everything together before we do movements. So that's really important. But those with low back pain, it's been shown in the research that transverse abdominis just shuts down. It just doesn't work as hard enough or as quick enough as it should do. So again, this is really important for, again, managing low back pain, improving low back pain symptoms, also preventing it. So again, really important for that. But yeah, and again, as a side note, I think things like trying to always target like our abs, again, might not be the best way to go. We need to do more of this transverse abdominis work. There's also another thing, just to make you guys aware of. I think we need to kind of put aside, or we do need to put aside, things where, or core exercises where our legs are moving. I don't know where these came from. They continue to survive. I think this is the lower ab myth in disguise, but we don't actually have lower abdominals. Okay, so if we're looking at that rectus abdominis, okay, so that attaches from ribs 5, 6, 7, and 8, and it goes down to our pubis. Okay, so that's that lower part of our pelvis. Okay, so that's where it goes to and from. So muscles can only move joints that they cross. So the only effect it can have is flexing our trunk this way, or it can help to tuck our pelvis under. It does what we call a posterior pelvic tilt. It cannot move our legs. It doesn't attach to our femurs. So if it doesn't attach to our femurs, being our thigh bones, it can't move them. So when we're doing those leg raises, those bicycle crunches, those kicks, whatever, the rectus abdominis is not involved there. That's going to be our hip flexor muscles, like our psoas, our iliacus, our rectus femoris, our TFL, all those muscles. And if you've been watching the corrective exercise videos when I spoke about things like an anterior pelvic tilt, you know that those muscles get short and overactive. They can be a problem. So if we're doing lots of those leg raises, there's a chance that we're going to increase the activity of the hip flexor muscles. It could end up with a reduction in extensibility, and then that could lead to things like that anterior pelvic tilt, where we get that excessive curve in the spine, and that could potentially lead to things like low back pain. So we could end up going away from what we were trying to do, improving our core function to stop low back pain, but could actually do stuff that could potentially lead to it. So let's not do that. So again, just to recap, guys, we don't have lower abdominals. Again, there's some confusion here. The rectus abdominis is just one muscle. There's technically a left and a right. I think there's some confusion with, again, we have these tendinous intersections that cut across the muscle belly, but that's all that is a continuation from connective tissue from our oblique muscles that kind of come across, and they wrap across this way. If anything, what it does do to the rectus abdominis, it gives it a little bit, it augments its ability to stabilize the trunk a little bit better. But that's it. You know, it is just one muscle. And again, when a muscle activates, so when it switches on, we have something called the all or none principle. So those muscle fibers either fire or they don't. And again, they fire from origin to insertion. So we have like a low action potential that comes down from our nerves. It stimulates the muscle cell, and it sends a signal that goes right away from where that muscle starts. So if it's the rectus abdominis, it's up at ribs 5 to 8, and it goes right down to where it inserts on the pelvis again. So it goes all the way across. It doesn't kind of stop halfway, or just does the lower part, or just does the upper part, or the middle bit, or this bit here. It doesn't do that. It just goes all the way down. So everything will contract. Okay, so the whole thing, and there's no research at all to say that you can isolate the lower abdominals to create motion. There is one study on belly dancing where they did have a slight, they were able to slightly activate, isolate the lower abdominals, but again, it was very minor, and again, it was to do with a types of belly roll. That was the only study, but again, it wasn't particularly significant, and also there was no motion that actually occurred. It was just again, as they rolled the belly, just different parts of it fired up. There are some different nerves that go into the different nerves that go into the rectus abdominis, but that was all it was. It didn't create any motion in any way. It was just kind of static. But again, you have to kind of consider physics. Again, if we did do lower abdominal work, bear in mind it's all one muscle. If the lower abdominal fibers shortened, then that would lengthen out the rest of the upper fibers. They would then lengthen. So the lower abdominal muscles would shorten, the upper ones would lengthen. We'd actually end up with no net movement. Everything would kind of relatively stay the same. So we wouldn't actually get any motion. So that can't work. That doesn't contribute to motion either, because again, if they shorten, these ones lengthen, we don't get any movement. So that's another thing we have to consider. There's some physics there involved. So again, this is just one muscle. Again, when a muscle activates, it goes all the way down across the entire muscle length. It activates, and all the rectus abdominis does again is it flexes the trunk and it tucks under the pelvis. It does that posterior pelvic tilt. So let's leave alone those leg raises, those bicycle crunches, all that other crazy stuff. We don't have lower abdominals. We're not doing ourselves any favor by trying to think we have lower abdominals or trying to work lower abdominals. Like I said, it could potentially lead to other problems. So let's just leave it alone, and let's go do these ones instead. Let's do like that deep core muscles. Let's get those ones that really help to stabilize the spine, really stabilize the trunk. And again, the more, remember what I said, the more stability that we have, the more force we can produce, and that's really what we want. So good. Hope you enjoyed these exercises, guys. Let me know if you have any questions.